Hello, today is our first official show for The Truth Shall Make You Free. And today we're going to discuss principles. So, this is our first official show, and I'll do an introduction of myself in the next show. But as I said in my beta test in my last show, I was going to do a show on principles today. And this is basically an introduction to principles and an introduction to natural law. So what are principles? So it comes from the word principia, which is a Latin word for first, foremost, leading, chief, most necessary, first things, that matters most. And here's the thing. Principles really in our lives must come first, because if you don't have principles, then your connections are weak and everything in life is meaningless, even family connections. So if you have no principles, you're easily shattered. So that's what a principle is. It's the first, most important, the foremost, and this is what are called the 7 hermetic principles. And then I have one generative principle. Plus, on top of the 7 principles, including the generative principle, I have 5, and then one extra bonus principle for 13. So, and today I just want you to know my technical guy and my assistant producer, and he's going to come in here, James Cleveland. He came and he's doing it. So here's the first principle that we're going to work with is mentalism. That's principle number 1 from the Kybalion, from the Hermetic laws, and what this principle says is that basically the mind is all, and that the universe is mental. So everything that exists is spirit. Matter is just densified spirit, and it is just refined matter. All is energy, and the substantial reality underlying all the outward manifestations and appearances which we know under the universe is spirit. It's undefinable, but considered as a universal living mind. So God, the infinite absolute, whatever you want to call it, the main thing to remember about this principle is the all is the mind, and the mind is all. Mentalism. It's related to spirit, though, not the kind of mind we're thinking of. We're going to go to the principle number 2, which is the law of correspondence. As above, so below. As below, so above. As within, so without. As the universe, so the soul. And so the spirit. Common in Hermetic philosophy, it means that there are different planes of existences. We can get into higher dimensions, which we'll get into later. But the macrocosm is found in the microcosm, and vice versa. Solar systems, the societies, quote-unquote, that we live in, and life on Earth reflects the cellular and atomic level, represents the galactic and universal level. That is principle number 2. Now, principle number 3 is the principle of vibration. Everything vibrates. So essentially, everything vibrates. It's that simple. It says that from the largest down to the lowest, everything vibrates. There are different degrees of vibration. That, for example, you have different levels. What is a spectrum? You have infrared up to ultraviolet, and then in between those two, you have higher and lower because you have gamma. But in between those two, you have the visible spectrum of light, and it all vibrates. And I can get into the heavy metaphysics of that, but everything in the universe vibrates. This chair I'm sitting on vibrates. The camera I'm watching you on vibrates. Everything vibrates. Everything moves. Everything vibrates. Nothing is actually, in this dimension, or any, at rest. Not to say at any, on some, we're not going to get into what's going on in counter space in the ether, but there is rest, but not in this domain. And the act of moving is a release of that resting state or that center, and that gets into meditation. Number 4, the principle of polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. So, and really, all poles are of like things. Like you have hot and cold, which are the same thing but to a different degree. So, so basically, you can't have hot and then have a house. That's not that. There's no polarity there because it's two different things. Things that have poles are opposites, like the north and south pole of the planet. It's an opposite. You can't have Jupiter and Earth and have them be opposite. Well, you could, but that's a bad example. But everything is has a pole. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature but different in degree. Extremes meet, and all truths are but half-truths. All paradox are to be reconciled. That's an interesting one, because in a lot of our ancient texts it talks about making the two become one. That's how you reconcile, and also good and evil. Well, how do you reconcile good and evil? You make the two become one. And what's interesting about that is when you start talking about the torus field and how they spin counter to each other, it's reconciled at the center, at the 0 point, or at the black hole where there is no gravity, so to speak. Then we have principle 5, which is rhythm, which says that everything flows out and everything has its tide, all things rise and fall. The principle explained that there's a rhythm between every pair of opposite poles, and the swing to one side of the pendulum is the swing to the other side. What's interesting about that is that this is one of those laws in nature that can actually be reconciled. So you can have the pendulum swing one way, but if you do the work, so say there's a lot of evil in the world, which it seems like there is at this time. Well, there's a way to make that pendulum, to stop that pendulum from swinging too far by using natural laws. So that's the thing about natural law, is you can either be controlled by natural law, or you can use the natural laws. And this is one that we can have an effect on. And this law is very important to your state of happiness and well-being. If you live in abundance, then times of scarcity will have much greater impact. So so one of the ways that we can affect this is visualization and positive thinking, or the opposite. So that's where we're going. And then 6 is probably one of the most important principles, is cause and effect. Every cause has its effect, and every effect has its cause. And here's what's interesting about cause and effect, is that there are ways that we can actually affect our world, and we'll get into that with the later laws that are a little more specific. But grace and responsibility are going to be coming up, and this is very related to cause and effect. But everything happens according to law. And chance is and this is my favorite saying, chance, luck, coincidence is just law unrecognized. There's a cause, and the effect that occurs comes from the cause. Now, most people, they try to, they work in the plane of effects, and they never get anywhere. You try to go and change your congressman. That's the plane of effects. Changing your congressman isn't really going to do anything. The change has to come from within you. And your thought process. But you're not going to changing what's going on in the world around you is not going to change what's going on when there's a cause preceding it. So that is the principle of cause and effect. The principle of gender. Gender is very similar to polarity, because the genders have poles. And again, gender is everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. So we're not talking about, when we talk about gender, we're not talking about biological sex. And I'll give you a quick example of gender, and we're going to get more specific as the show progresses. But so you have the right side of your brain, which is the creative, feminine, intuitive side. And then we have the left side of our brain, which is the logical, masculine side. And what you want to do actually is use the law of rhythm and make those two become one, and the law of mentalism and cause and effect, to bring that polarity to the center so that you're balanced. So that would be an example of polarity. That's why I think these two are very similar. Now, here's one that a lot of people don't know. There's an 8th, what I call generative principle. And that 8th principle is care. Care, what you care about, where your energy goes, where your thoughts go, your energy flows. And so what you care about is what you'll focus on and where your energy goes. And to make the changes that we want to make in this world, the kind of people that are probably watching this show, to make the changes that we want in this world, we have to care. It's up to us. It's up to us individually and collectively. And if you don't care and you just say you care, but you don't engage in the right action, the willful action, which we'll get into in the law of intention and manifestation, then, you know, those changes aren't going to happen. And that's why these laws are important, because they're basic, they're very basic, and they're very fundamental. And I'm trying, Jim, to keep this under 10 minutes. Can you see where we are?
We are at 10 minutes and 40 seconds.
All right, so we're going to hustle through these last four. That's the 8th principle. We got 4 and then one more. The law of compensation. I'm going to be quick with this. It's an eye for an eye. What you give is what you get back. That is the law of compensation. Pretty simple. And then we have grace and responsibility as a law. So forgiveness, compassion, it dissolves your forgiveness and compassion dissolves karma and accrues blessings. And then responsibility. So we want to take one should take responsibility for their own actions and for their own outcomes in life. And this is kind of related to cause. It's more specific. It's a more specific of cause and effect. So take responsibility for your actions and stop blaming other people, because when you blame other people, that is not very empowering. If the outcome is negative, assess what the causes were of that outcome / effect and change it. And if the outcome is positive, then assess the cause and continue to repeat that behavioral pattern. And there's my boy Luke that you'll get to know well. So that's the law of grace and responsibility. And then we have the law of intention and manifestation. Thoughts are things. Keep your thoughts pure. If you have an intention and you put the proper energy into it, that intention through the proper energy, which is the thought, feeling, words, and deeds, will and can manifest, and you can manifest / create in the physical world. So that's the law of intention and manifestation. And then the 12th principle that I added is love. And this is in the Christian scripture. Love thyself and thy God / universe / energy / higher self with all thy heart, mind, and soul, and love the neighbor as thyself. And, you know, that is the fulfillment of the law. And I have a 13th not so hidden principle these days that is very similar to that and that applies to it. And it's called the law of one. And it's simple. It states we're all one. Everything in the universe is connected, and we are all a part of the infinite absolute. So when we hurt another being, we're basically hurting ourselves. It's a form of self-mutilation. And I was going to go into what is a right, but we'll do that. We'll get into that next time, or on the next. Next time, what I'm thinking about doing is introducing myself and why I'm qualified to be giving out this information, talking about philosophy, metaphysics, natural law, healing, what qualifies me. And that's what we'll get into next time. That's a wrap.